Hello, and welcome to New Beginnings Start Today, the podcast for people who want to grow deeper in their faith in the Lord. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas Keffer, a minister, licensed clinical pastoral counselor here in Roanoke, Virginia, and I have a passion to help people live their faith. Today, we will talk about overcoming disappointment and how you can learn to put what is happening in your life in God's care and watch how He works things out for your good. Let's look at this. We have all had to deal with disappointment in our lives at one time or another. I think back to when I was a child, 8 or 9 years old, and all I wanted for Christmas was a Timex watch, the one that takes a beating but keeps on ticking. That was their old saying. Christmas morning came, and all of us 5 children went to the dining room where our live blue spruce Christmas tree was beautifully decorated and all the presents under the tree. My mother would pass out the presents, and we had to wait until everybody had their presents before we could start opening them. It was time for us to tear into that gift wrap and see what we had gotten for our Christmas presents. I looked at all my packages, but none of them, of the 3 or 4 that I had, looked like a box that would have my Timex watch in it. I started to open the presents, and there were my new underwear, my new socks, my new set of toy soldiers, but I did not open a present that had my Timex watch. Needless to say, I was very disappointed and sad because my parents knew how much I was looking forward to that watch. I thanked my parents and siblings for what they had gotten me, but my heart was sad and my disappointment was evident. Later that morning, my grandmother Colbert and her husband and my Aunt Loretta arrived. They drove over 40 miles to spend Christmas with us, which was a real treat because they could only do that if the weather permitted, because it snowed tremendously, and they could get snowed in where they lived in Somerset, Pennsylvania. They came in carrying their gifts for us, and the excitement grew as we began to open their gifts. I picked one up and shook it. Could this be my Timex watch? I thought. I took the wrapping paper off and saw the word Timex on the front of the box, and my heart skipped a beat. I opened that box, and there was my Timex watch, and I wanted so badly. I screamed with joy, and I don't know how many times I thanked my Grandma Colbert and Aunt Loretta for getting the most wonderful gift I had ever gotten. I put that watch on, and I didn't take it off until I went to bed. My disappointment was real, but God's providence was fulfilled by my grandmother bringing that watch to give to me for Christmas, and my sorrow turned to joy. By the way, my parents knew that my grandma Colbert was getting me that watch, and they kept that secret very, very, very well. I'm sure many of you could tell me about similar disappointments that you have had, but maybe without the happy ending that I had with getting my Timex watch. There is one thing that we all have in common when dealing with the disappointments we've had to deal with. We had to find ways, we have to find ways to deal with them that allowed us to know that we had to go on with our lives no matter how hard or hurtful the circumstances can get. That is not always easy because things in our lives can get very difficult, and we choose how we are going to deal with them. We can either allow the hard times to defeat us, or we can trust in our faith that God is going to help us when we see that we can get beyond the effect of what caused us to hurt to begin with, what caused that hurt and that pain. I want I want you to hear how the apostle Paul overcame having a huge disappointment in his life when he wrote, "Therefore, in order to keep me from being conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am made strong." 2 Corinthians 12, verses 7b through 10. We are told that Paul believes that God gave him a, quote, "thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me," unquote, so that he would keep himself from being too prideful in his service for the Lord. Paul tells us that he asked the Lord 3 times to remove this thorn. Listen to what Jesus told him. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul was told that the Lord's grace, his favor for Paul's life, was sufficient because the Lord's power is made perfect in weakness. That is a hard lesson to learn in many ways. Please know that I am not saying that you can only ask God 3 times to help you with a situation that has been or is being disappointing to you. That is not the message here. I want you to see that Paul was being taught that the thorn allowed him to stay close to the Lord to enable him to do what was necessary to fulfill the purpose in ministry for Jesus. I want you to learn that when you feel disappointed by God, you have to understand that you are wanting something from Him more than what you want Him in your life. King David tells us how he found assurance in God's care when he faced disappointments, when he wrote, "I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear the Lord and put their trust in him." Psalm 40, verses 1 through 3. David is saying that he waited patiently on the Lord and was not disappointed with God's response to his cry. God does hear you, and his help is available to you when the things that come up in your life that want to crush you. Do you hear what David said to God, or said that God did? David describes God's actions. He lifted me. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to God, to our God. God will respond to your pleas, but it is going to be in his timeline. That is why David said that he waited patiently and saw that God took specific actions to help him over the things that were disappointing him. When we live with that kind of resolve, we have a huge impact on those around us. David also tells us that was the case when he trusted God with his life, when he says, "Many will see and fear the Lord and put their trust in him." Living in that kind of faith will cause people to take notice of how you deal with those tough situations, and they see a positive outcome. I am thinking of a pastor and his wife I counseled many years ago. He was unfaithful to her in their marriage, and she divorced him. He lost his church and his family over this. The wife also was so disappointed over the fact that he chose that carnal lifestyle over what they had, and it crushed her. She moved out of state back to where her family lived. He prayed and prayed. He prayed that she would forgive him as truly as he repented, and begged her to allow them to try to regain their relationship. He finally moved back to the area that she went to and showed her his commitment to doing what it would take to allow her to trust him again. I am happy to tell you that his patience worked and God put a new song in their lives and they reunited. God does and can hear your cry too. Don't stop crying out to him as his love and cares as he loves and cares for you. You have to ask yourself, why am I disappointed? I have found that the reason this goes on in a person's life is because they are looking for something in this world more than they are looking for God. Whether it is employment, freedom from an addiction, a child, or a spouse, or being disappointed that these needs have not been met means that they are more important to you than the provisions God promises He will give you. I have learned that when I am disappointed with God, the first thing I do is sit down and focus on my relationship with God Himself. This brings me the strength to know that He is always there to hear my plea and to give me comfort and strength to keep moving forward. Paul asked a very important question to the Christians in Galatia when he writes, "So again I ask, does God give you his Spirit and work miracles among you by the works of the law or by your believing what you heard?" Galatians 3 and verse 5. Those Christians, too, had to learn that God worked in their lives because they believed what they heard in the message of truth that Paul shared. God is ready to give you his Spirit and work miracles in your life today so that your disappointment can be turned to praise for his goodness in whatever you are facing. Thank you for listening to this episode. And I want to invite you to contact and share how you are seeing the power of trusting God's care of your life in the middle of your demanding circumstances. Answer this question: how have you allowed God to put a new song in your mouth amidst your disappointments? If you are seeing this on YouTube, please click the subscribe button and the like button. Also, click on the share button and share it with all your friends. That would be so helpful. Tell me about other issues that you would like me to address by leaving your comments, and you can email me at drdouglaskeffer at gmail.com. I also encourage you to get a copy of my book, New Beginnings Start Today with God. And it is in the my on my website at drdouglaskaffer.com. Click on the link below. Until next time, God bless you.